Chapter 11. First Ally. Khan heard all the notifications inside his head. He already expected something like this to happen when he killed the red wolf and heard the ding sound in his head. To his surprise, Khan not only learned how to activate War Dominance Aura and Berserk God Mode, but he also broke through the current threshold of his capacity and already went past his limits to meet the conditions to unlock his War Deity body. This means he will be twice stronger when he recovered his strength again. The very first encounter Khan had in Vantria as soon as he entered was a life or death battle, and he barely managed to survive. Who knew if he ended up dying here? Would anyone ever know or care? He died just a nameless death. Again. Khan tried to focus his mind again on these notifications in his mind. There was no system panel or screen board for him to check these notifications in a list or scroll through them one by one. It was as if this system was part of his consciousness itself and somehow acted like his mind when he thought about it. Tell me more. He tried commanding it. 3 dead bodies found near the host. The host is advised to use ability absorption divine ability and raise his strength. Also, the host can use synthesis divine ability to merge 2 of these entities to create a subordinate. The host must salvage and eat the cores situated near the hearts of these 3 entities. The robot-like voice stopped, informing Khan about his accomplishments and what he could do to recover and get strong. Cool. At least I have some sort of guide for at least basic stuff and reminders. Khan said as he went to sleep due to exhaustion. 6 hours later. Khan opened his eyes and looked around. He was still in that same place and the bodies of the 3 wolves were lying in the same places where they died. Khan finally felt like he had the strength enough to get up. He stood up from the ground and walked towards the red wolf. He remembered the notifications he had before he fell asleep. He looked towards the body of the red wolf. He still could not believe that happened just this morning. He glanced at the body with a look of exacting his revenge. Well. How the turntables. He smirked and gloated about his victory, which he barely achieved by a hair's breadth. Well then. Time to eat. He was going to use ability absorption on the red wolf because it felt like the leader of the pack and was obviously much stronger than the others. Absorb. Khan commanded as he mentally thought about acquiring its abilities. Host needs to touch the specimen first. The voice in his mind replied. My bad. He touched the body of the red wolf and imagined absorbing its abilities. Suddenly, some sort of suction force was exerted from his hand which was touching the red wolf, and in just a matter of seconds, the body of the red wolf looked drained out of the blood and the claws and fangs it had were reduced to nothing as if they were sucked inside something. Ding. Ability absorption divine ability unlocked. The host has acquired the following abilities. Alpha Wolf's Claw. Alpha Wolf's Howl. Long Stride. Hunt Perception. Predator's Eyes. Synthesis divine ability unlocked. Predator's Eyes ability synthesized and merged under War Dominance to increase its effectiveness. The host will be able to exude a predatory intent towards the target when using War Dominance Aura. Khan was truly surprised. Not only did he learn physical abilities like the first 3 mentioned, but he also acquired the innate skills of a wolf like Hunt Perception and Predator's Eyes, which would prove useful for him to survive inside this jungle for the time being. By now, there was nothing left inside the body of the red wolf but its bones. All the meat and blood was gone. Only its hide was left completely untouched and a red orb-like thing, which according to the inner system inside Khan's head was the core. Khan thought of using Wolf's Claw and both his hands turned pitch black. His nails started growing from his fingers at a fast pace. They were no longer just nails but claws at this point. Khan felt like he indeed turned into something else than just human. He saw this coming and didn't waste any more time overthinking about it. He tore through the hide from various places to use it to cover up enough parts of his body for now. It was already around evening, so he needed something to cover himself up. And since these 3 wolves were very big to begin with, just this red wolf's hide was enough to cover his waist like a towel and also something he could use to cover his shoulders. Khan took the core out of the body. It was completely clean. Not even a single drop of blood on it. He remembered the system voice telling him to must eat it to get stronger. Currently, he barely had the strength to walk because he used Berserk God Mode earlier, so he had to regain his strength and prepare for the night. He had to keep himself safe, so having more strength was a must. He gulped down the reddish orb-like thing which sized around a thumb of a grown man. Suddenly, he heard more sounds in his mind. Monster core absorbed and assimilated with host's body. Mana capacity increased by 5 points. All physical attributes raised by 1 point. Khan felt a bit of his strength recovered, just very minute at the moment because he was in a weakened state. He wrapped the hide around his waist and leftover around his shoulders like a scarf. He walked towards the bodies of the other two wolves and dragged them towards each other. How do I merge them? He asked the system in his mind. Host must place his hands on both specimens. Host is advised to keep at least one core intact in the original bodies to get a better success rate and stronger specimen. What if I keep both of the cores during the procedure?
Con asked.
In such case, the resultant creature will unlock evolution ability. And such subordinate can be further merged with another subordinate, which also has unlocked evolution. Both these entities can be used to create a higher variant species and a more powerful subordinate. The system replied to his queries.
Understood.
By the way, will the resultant creature of synthesis be loyal to me or at least won't attack me?
Yes.
Since subordinates are created for the sole purpose of aiding and protecting the host, they will be programmed to obey the host and will always be ready to die to protect and serve the host. Con got more information about synthesis divine ability now. He needed to learn and know about every advantage he had so he could stay alive in this forest for now. Can the system interact with outside things and aid me in any way? Con asked out his final question as he needed to understand the full capacities of the guide system he was given.
No.
The system cannot act outside of the host's body. It's only created to help the host to understand the working of his divine abilities and blessings. The system has no control over anything the host doesn't have physical contact with. The host is advised to rely on himself to become stronger and survive in the world. The system is only an interface created to guide the host through normal procedures and inform the workings of the abilities and skills. Con now fully understood the extent of his inner system. Unlike some OP systems in the novels and mangas, his system was more of an assistant than some formidable external entity that could create stuff out of nowhere, help him copy knowledge just by touching a book or had a shop to buy stuff from using some sort of point system. This was nothing but a program left inside his soul to help him gain a better understanding of his abilities and use them in the most efficient way. He had to rely on his brain and body while wandering in the world. Con came close to both the dead wolves' bodies, placed his hands on both of them and said,
Emerge.
Unlike what Con expected, nothing happened for the next few seconds. Con wondered if he gave some wrong command or something. Just as he was about to speak again, a black shadow appeared under his palms and covered both bodies. And in the next few seconds, both these shadows stretched out and converged together. The bodies of the wolves were completely engulfed inside the shadow and disappeared as if the bodies were absorbed by the shadow. For over a minute, the shadow kept wriggling around and finally, a four-legged creature started appearing. This creature was 7 feet tall, had complete black fur over its body and eyes completely red with black pupils in them. Congratulations to host for creating the first subordinate. The results of the synthesis are as follows.
Name, unnamed. Species, dire wolf.
Abilities, sonic howl, predator's eyes, hunt perception, sprinter, dire wolf claws, shadow merge. Subordinate has inherited all the physical and mental traits of the specimens used during synthesis. Subordinate has unlocked evolution skill. It can be evolved further or merged with another subordinate. Host is advised to give it a fitting name.
Great.
Finally, I don't have to worry about something attacking me during the night. Con said as he sighed in relief. Then he asked the system again. System, can you create an interface or panel to compare me and this wolf based on our strength levels and attributes?
Yes.
Commanded adjustments can be made. But comparison can only be done between the host and the subordinate. To create comparisons between external beings, the host must touch them or form physical contact. Here are the following statistics as requested by the host.
Name, Con, host. Species, human. Level, 1. Strength, 2. Agility, 2. Dexterity, 3. Defense, 2. Mana, 5. Name, unnamed.
Species, dire wolf, variant.
Level, 10. Strength, 25. Agility, 20. Dexterity, 20. Defense, 10. Mana, 15.
Comparison made based on the physical state before the host underwent weakened state. Con was left speechless. Only now did he fully understood how close he was to death. If not for war dominance aura suppressing the wolves and his berserk god mode giving him the strength to kill them, he would be dead for sure. Because all the 3 wolves were at least level 5 compared to him. And the new synthesized wolf was created using 2 complete bodies and their cores, so it was twice stronger than them and even a higher version of wolves called the dire wolves. just imagining what would happen if Khan had fought against the wolf standing in front of him instead. This gave him goosebumps with just the thought of it. He was lucky that this wolf was his underling instead. He came close to the giant dire wolf, placed his palm on its head and spoke, "Just since I already killed that alpha wolf and I'm not an idiot to call you Kuro, Wolfie or Feru just because you're black and are a wolf, from now on your name shall be Omega."
Ding.
Congratulations to the host for naming his first subordinate. The loyalty of the subordinate towards the host increased by 50%. The system voice rang and informed Khan. What's this loyalty increase about? Aren't they already loyal to me? He asked. It's a specific condition to unlock a special skill between the host and the subordinates, replied the system.
Good.
If naming them helps raise their loyalty, then I'll have to be creative and thoughtful, Khan said and patted Omega's head like petting a dog. Omega sat down in front of Khan and bowed his head without looking Khan in the eyes. It felt as if Omega was submitting himself and acknowledged Khan as its master. The next moment, Khan felt a sort of connection towards Omega, as if the wolf was an extension of his own body and consciousness. Do you understand what I'm saying? Khan asked Omega to check whether his guess was right. Omega nodded in response and stood back up.
Good.
Now go and hunt something I could eat. Not too big, and meat shouldn't be too hard to chew,
Khan commanded Omega.
Since he was under the weakened state as a repercussion of using the Berserk God mode, he barely had the strength to walk and could not go to find something to eat. He thought about having something to eat first because he had no energy left in him and meat was the best source to regain strength. After Omega ran off towards the bushes and completely disappeared out of his sight, Khan called to the system again. System, can you help me create fire? Khan asked curiously. What am I, your mother? Do it yourself. System replied with banter instead. You wait, say that again? Host is advised to rely on himself. System cannot help the host in such tasks. The robotic voice was back again. This made Khan doubt if System was a living being as well. But he didn't dwell on the matter and walked towards the close-by tree and broke their branches. He found a thin but sturdy branch which he could use to rub on other thick branches. This was basically Bear Grylls from Man vs. Wild. After failing for an hour and barely managing to generate enough heat on the wood to create smoke and then using dry leaves to fan it out to create fire, finally Khan managed to create his campfire. It was already evening and the night was beginning. He judged that it would be around 6 p.m. based on the position of the sun. Thankfully, he had a way to keep himself warm and protected for the night. In half an hour, Omega finally returned with 4 rabbit-like things in its mouth. These things looked more like a combination between rabbits and mongoose with red and green stripes on their bodies. This was the first unfamiliar creature Khan saw in Vantria. Khan could see that these little things had a lot of meat on them, so he found that sufficient for the night. Khan activated his wolf claws and dissected these little creatures. He had to dirty his hands if he wanted to eat. After cutting out the flesh and throwing away the entrails, he walked towards the nearby stream to wash it clean, Omega being on guard duty and keeping an eye around. After they got back, Khan poked in some thin branches inside the meat parts and grilled them on the campfire. Smelling the scent of freshly grilled meat, even Omega started salivating and started using puppy eyes towards Khan.
Khan was stunned.
This thing was a damn wolf, an apex predator. But now it was acting like a cute little doggy as soon as there was grilled meat in front of it. Wasn't this supposed to be some magical creature he created? Did it really need to eat? Khan sighed and continued grilling. When he was finally done, he took the meat of 2 rabbit-like animals and gave the rest left from the remaining 2 to Omega. They both needed the food to have enough strength for tomorrow. After filling his stomach till he was completely full, Khan went back to the stream and drank the water from the current. He could only hope that the meat he ate was edible and won't cause him food poisoning instead. Khan returned to their campsite and rested his back against the tree. He finally felt the tiredness wash over his body and felt like falling asleep soon. Omega was resting near him and had its ears perked up, ready to react if something approached them during the night. Khan gazed towards the night sky, looking at the clear and bright stars. This was his first day in Vantria. He already had a near-death experience, made an ally and now enjoying the view of the night he barely saw in his previous life. The whole forest under the moonlight looked very serene. Resting his eyes, Khan said to himself, let's see what tomorrow has in the store for me.
Chapter 12. The Big Hunt.
In a dense forest full of tall and broad trees, a group of animals that could be called a mixture between deer and a predatory beast were eating grass peacefully. But unbeknownst to these creatures, there were 2 sets of eyes looking towards them from a distance. One of them was a giant wolf with a full pitch black fur on its entire body, while another was a man wearing a dark red hide around his waist. Both of their eyes looked as if they were here to kill everything that stood in front of them. Kon and Omega were using their hunt perception ability. While using it, Kon's pupils dilated and he gained a more detailed and zoomed view of his targets. He could see the heat signatures of his prey from 20 meters far and even feel which one of the creatures had all their muscles completely relaxed. You take the left and I'll draw their attention. Attack as soon as I appear in front of them. And take down the one closest to the tree. Understood? Kon looked towards Omega. Omega nodded and left without causing any unnecessary noises which could alert their targets. Kon silently progressed towards the herd by crouching through tall grass on both of his hands and legs like a four-legged animal would. He wasn't hasty nor clumsy. He looked like a tiger waiting for a perfect time to attack. Kon quickly activated his war dominance aura as soon he reached near the herd. Strong pressure of gravity was exerted around a 5-meter radius, and before these creatures could react, Kon pounced towards the nearest creature, while activating his alpha wolf's claws and swung his right claw around the nape of the creature, which was caught off guard and couldn't even move under the pressure of war dominance. Bluish blood started flowing on the ground as soon as his claws pierced through the hide, which felt as tough as leather in a matter of seconds. This sudden attack alerted the other members of the herd, and they tried to run away the very next second. Kon had limited reach on the area he could cover under war dominance aura, so some of them had full control on their bodies and started running off. Only to be attacked by a giant dire wolf from the opposite side. Omega was very vicious, unlike Kon. He didn't go for a swift kill, rather plunged his teeth inside their necks and ripped apart the head out of their bodies. Blue blood spurted like a fountain on the green grass, but the massacre didn't stop. Both Kon and Omega dashed towards their respective closer targets and attacked in a pre-planned manner. It was as if they had completely practiced their coordination. The massacre continued until there were 5 dead bodies on the ground. Out of the 9 of these creatures, 4 managed to escape while 5 went to heaven to meet their maker. I guess we got lucky. Kon said and put his right hand on one of the dead creatures.
Absorb.
Host has acquired the following abilities. Sprinter, Panorama Vision, Wilker Hide. So these are called Wilker? Kon learned the name of the species through the system. He imagined himself having the same tough skin as the Wilkers, and his skin completely turned green like these creatures, and small spikes appeared all over his body.
Ugh.
I look like Killer Croc now. Kon deactivated the ability and collected the core. Meanwhile, Omega was tearing out the flesh and entrails of the other bodies with his large fangs, as if he had been hungry for years. He only left out the cores for Kon and nothing else. Kon had already recovered, and now he was 4 times stronger than when it entered Vantria through the void. His war deity body had also completed its first transformation and became twice stronger compared to before. And Kon also ate the cores of small animals Omega hunted in the morning. And according to the system, he was now level 2 and his body attributes and stats had doubled as well. Still, this was no excuse to be laid back and hope things will go in his favor. He still remembered vividly how he barely managed to kill the wolves yesterday and survived by a hair's breadth. Otherwise, it'd be him who was torn through and gutted down by the pack of wolves. So he didn't wish to waste any time. Somehow, Omega had a proper understanding of which prey they could hunt with their capabilities and which ones they shouldn't. It was more like an innate sense of his dire wolf species. Thanks to that, Kon didn't dare to attack various types of animals and predators in the jungle out of his foolishness. If even Omega, who was now level 15, didn't dare take a step closer to these creatures, it'd be stupid of Kon to target these monsters. Kon gulped down 2 of these cores after rubbing off the blue blood on them. He was already accustomed to it now, and the gory scene in front of him didn't bother him at all. He kept the other 2 just in case he needed them later to either eat or use for some other purpose.
Ding.
Congratulations to the host for reaching level 3. Kon didn't check his stats and looked at Omega.
Let's go.
It's about time we hunt that damn snake. Kon said with fervor, his eyes looking like they were after seeking revenge against someone. Omega, who had his fill of meat and innards, nodded and arched down in front of Kon. Kon sat on its back and they headed towards the north where there was a broad valley full of boulders and water streams. After reaching midway, they both stopped and looked towards a big nest made out of tree logs and branches. Inside this nest, which was the same size as a tennis field/ground, lied a giant snake-like creature sleeping soundly and basking in the rays of the sun. In between its wound-up body were 3 giant eggs with a golden color shell. In the morning, when Kon and Omega started their hunting spree, they made a rookie mistake of not gauging their target strength. There was no strategy either, all they did was just waltz in and attack their target. But unlike the Wilkers they hunted just now, this thing was a true predator. Before Con and Omega even appeared in a 15-meter radius, it sensed them and attacked them instead. To make the matters worse, it had greenish acid spraying out of its mouth which melted a tree log as soon as it got hit. Con and Omega had no other choice but to run off for their lives like chickens running away from a butcher. This creature had small horns protruding from its skull to the nape region, fangs and teeth of a snake and blue eyes and black tongue. Its body had extremely white scales which looked fortified in some regions like a saw. This time, Con had a proper strategy. It was not like killing this creature was a must, but he wanted that poison ability which was very lethal. He could use it to kill his enemies and even melt some things like stone slabs or even a boulder if he needed to. He wanted this type of skill because he didn't think there'd be many creatures like this one in the forest. This wasn't just some random nobody either. This snake-like creature looked like the boss of this area, given how it was wide in the open and there was not a single animal or another monster that appeared near 2 kilometers in this area. This was its turf. Even Omega wasn't strong enough to kill it. The reason why he didn't sense any threat the first time because this creature could somehow mask its presence and appeared only big in size. But after looking at the giant eggs, Con understood that this was a female protecting her eggs and that's why it didn't exude a noticeable aura or killing intent. There didn't appear to be any signs of another one like this, so he had both advantage in numbers and ways to distract the creature. Con and Omega looked towards a big boulder, which was sized the same as a house, and walked towards it. Luckily, this boulder was situated at a slope just in the direction of the nest. If they decide to push it from the edge, it would definitely roll down and hit the nest. Both Con and Omega pushed the boulder with all their strengths after activating some of their brute abilities and finally pushed and rooted out the boulder. They made sure to not cause loud grunting noises which could alert the creature again. Once they were finally done, both took a small rest while Con planned his next move. If this was Earth, current Con and his physical strength would make him as strong as Colossus from X-Men, who had a complete steel body. So moving this gigantic boulder with the help of Omega, who was already strong enough to destroy a giant truck in a head-on clash, was doable for them. Just like we did it last time. But we need to be accurate in our timing. I'll divert its attention and you push down the boulder. Just make sure you don't do it before it comes close to me, or our plan fails and it later hunts us both till our deaths. Understood? Con asked Omega. Omega nodded its head in compliance. Con activated his newly gained sprinter ability and ran with very fast and long leaps from time to time. He reached towards the entrance of the valley again. Con stood there like he was going out on a war facing thousands of people by himself, with his broad shoulders and muscular body standing tall. As soon as he entered the sensitive area of the snake-like creatures, the creature opened its eyes again and looked in Con's direction. Hiss! The creature hissed at Con, trying to scare him and telling him to stay away. But Con didn't budge a bit. Instead he activated his Alpha Wolf's howl ability and howled like a true wolf in the direction of the creature. The intensity and amplitude of this howl was so high that it caused ripples on the water that was flowing nearby. The next second, Con activated his war dominance aura and stared straight into the eyes of the creature. This was a declaration of war. The creature was angered to its core and finally lifted its complete body out of the nest. 10 meters tall snake-like monster with giant fangs stared at Con with a look full of rage. It slithered in Con's direction to attack him. Omega, be ready or we both die today, buddy. Con spoke in a loud voice. He didn't expect the creature to be this big. The creature kept slithering towards Con with a look of contempt and mockery, as if an elephant was looking at an ant. It didn't attack Con hastily, rather examined him before making the final decisive attack. Con then activated his sprinter ability again and ran in the opposite direction, which made the giant snake follow him as every big predator liked playing with their food. Only after running 500 meters away from his previous location did Con stop. As soon as the serpent reached 10 meters of his proximity, he shouted, now! On the other side at the top of the slope, Omega finally received the command. He was already ready. He quickly ran and slammed his body on the giant boulder to give the final push. Just as the boulder started rolling and gaining momentum due to the slope, the giant snake finally moved its head towards the direction of the noise and saw where the boulder was headed to. The eggs. It slithered its way across the small boulders and the water stream in hurry and paced towards the nest, but it was very far because Con had already led it at a distance far away. Hit them from where they can't see it. Con grinned. It was all part of his plan. Naturally, he and Omega wouldn't be able to do jack shit against a creature this strong. So he had no other choice but to use this method. He quickly adapted from their previous encounter, understood the surroundings and used the environment to his advantage. The creature paced towards the nest with all its might and finally managed to reach it. But what awaited it was a giant boulder with so much weight and speed that there simply wasn't enough time for the creature to engulf or wound up and take the eggs away. With no other choice, it had the only option to face the giant boulder with its body. It came in between the nest border, which was made up of tree logs, and put its entire body to stop the boulder, or the eggs would be smashed to the bits. It sprayed all its acid from the mouth at the incoming boulder, hoping that it'd melt just in time.
Bang!
A loud sound of two hard things banging against each other resounded in the area. Sadly, the creature overestimated its abilities and got smashed in the head with the giant boulder before it even started melting. Half of its body was squashed under the gigantic boulder as well. There was a defensive armor-like shell that appeared on its head in the last moment, clearly its life-saving ability. But even that wasn't able to protect the serpent. And its body lied just close to the nest, bearing all the brunt of the boulder and protecting its children at the expense of its life. Khan looked at the eggs. He clearly understood what his actions meant. He chose to use the maternal instinct of this giant serpent to protect its eggs and to force it to face off that incoming boulder. It was the only way he could kill it. Otherwise, he naturally wouldn't dare to do it until he was at least 20 times stronger than his current strength. And he wouldn't use Omega to fight it out till its last breath, either just to gauge the serpent's strength. Khan was sure that given the appearance and aura this creature in front of him exuded, it was definitely many times stronger than them. The old him, as Elric in his previous life, would never do something like this no matter what, but in this world in his second life, he had to do whatever he can to survive and become stronger. Just by how his strength grew after he killed monsters and ate their cores, there was a long journey of bloodbath ahead for Khan. So he had to put aside his feelings and heart and do what must be done. It was kill or be killed. Khan took a deep breath and came closer to the dead body. Only now did he notice that the creature was around 25 meters long and the body width was that of a width of a small car. This wasn't your average day-to-day monster, rather a rare species. Khan placed both his hands on the ginormous body of the serpent. A system, tell me about this creature. Khan commanded his inner system. Scanning completed. Information unlocked. Species, Somir. Description: a descendant species of one of the 5 ancient godbeasts, the basilisk. Level, 40. Abilities: Venom Acid, Acute Sense, Paralysis Gaze, Poison Immunity, Grandmaster/S rank. Note: host is advised to absorb the abilities with the bloodline of this monster and must eat the core. To this information, Khan only stood still like a stone statue. Only after a dozen seconds he broke out of his shock and shouted, "Holy fuck." Chapter 13. The Regret. Gobsmacked. Khan's jaw hit the ground as soon as he heard the information. This wasn't just some higher version of a species, it was a descendant of an ancient godbeast. Although Khan had no idea of what these godbeasts were, but given the fact that the word god was in the name, it was enough to give him a clear idea of how strong that mythical creature might be. Even for a descendant, the Somir in front of him was already a very strong creature. If not for Khan using a despicable and underhanded method, like using the kids to kill the mother, he possibly couldn't have done it unless he had reached the same level as the one lying on the ground. Absorb. Khan spoke and the ability absorption divine ability started working, but unlike the previous times, it took around 4 minutes to finally absorb the new abilities. But at the end of it, there was still 80% of the flesh and blood from the original body was left as it is. The system probably absorbed only that was enough and left the rest. Ding. The host has acquired the following abilities: Poison Acid, Paralysis Gaze, Poison Immunity, Grandmaster rank, Acute Sense, Somir Scales, Basilisk Bloodline absorbed, 30% purity. Note: Acute Sense merged under Survival Intent Blessing. The accuracy of Survival Intent ability increased by 40% and the range increased to 15 meters. Synthesis Divine ability activated. Host can merge Predator's eyes and Paralysis Gaze to create a new skill. Would host like to perform the synthesis? Synthesize. Khan said without a hitch. Synthesis complete. Host can now divert his killing intent towards a single target and the target will be paralyzed on the spot, unable to move its body for the next 20 seconds. Works only on target weaker than the host. The host must name this first merged skill. Khan thought for a moment about the most fitting name. With this newly created skill, he could simply make anyone attacking him stop midway through their attack, paralyze them on the spot and simply walk towards them and end their lives under those 20 seconds. This was him simply executing his enemies. Executioner's Gaze. Congratulations to the host for creating the first skill. The efficiency of Executioner's Gaze increased by 50% and time extended to 30 seconds.
Bloody hell.
Khan shouted and started laughing like the Joker. This new skill was just too OP. Imagine if he could upgrade this ability in the future and use it on multiple targets at the same time. He'd be able to face any ambush with ease. Even with just a single target, this could save his life if he were to fight someone who's attacking from a long distance like an archer or attacked him from stealth like an assassin. Khan would be able to sense the attacker with his survival intent and then use Executioner's Gaze to root them on the spot. This skill will definitely be one of his trump cards. After finally stopping his maniacal laughs, Khan activated and tried out Somir's Scales ability. Quickly, black hexagonal skin as hard as an iron shield appeared around all over his body. And the best part was that it was very lightweight and didn't hinder Khan's physical movements at all. This was by far his best defensive skill because even Wilker Hyde's skill put a lot of restrictions on his body parts with all the spikes and bulged out regions, which would become a problem if he was wearing any clothes and had to use this ability to protect himself. If he was forced to use it among a crowd, he'd be labeled as a monster or a mixed race. Khan wondered a bit and asked the system. Hey system, this wasn't listed in the abilities of the Somir when you scanned it. So how did I get this ability? Ability Absorption Divine ability can extract all forms of physical and magical abilities, bloodlines of rare species and skills from any targeted being. Somir's Scales are its unique and exclusive physical ability. Extremely rare even amongst other descendant species of godbeasts. The scales can't be broken through even with Alpha Wolf's Claws ability the host already has. This gave Khan another revelation. If they had not used the gigantic boulder's speed and weight while forcing the Somir to use its body to protect the eggs, they possibly would never have managed to kill it. Forget killing it, both Khan and Omega's most offensive abilities and skills wouldn't have even left a scratch on the scales. Is the goddess of luck in love with me?
Khan asked himself.
First, it was the pack of wolves he luckily managed to kill just in time before his berserk god mode ended, and now this terrifying creature, which he couldn't have managed to kill even with all his attacking abilities without dying at least 100 times before he could even make it bleed.
Oh my god.
Is this the legendary plot armor? Khan asked himself, full of awe and disbelief. Because given how things were going in his favor, whether it was keeping his life in the last moment or gaining abilities suitable and to his advantage given his current situation, there was definitely someone akin to a god helping him from behind the shadows.
Autor. Sterntipps Imaginari hat Jahre daze. Few.
Protagonist Haloha. He spoke to himself and then examined his body again. The scales covered many vital organs on his body such as his heart, his abdomen, neck region and private parts. His shoulders and arms looked like Batman's batsuit from the Dark Knight, only with hexagonal patterns in his case. His entire body had become a walking and breathing armor. Apart from his face, he could cover his entire body in these ink-black yet shiny and lustrous scales which even reflected the sun rays to some degree. Khan finally got a hold on his emotions and tore through the abdomen region of Somir, which wasn't covered by these scales, and took the core out of the Somir's heart. But unlike all his previous encounters with the monster, this core wasn't red but violet in color and radiating a faint glow as well. System, what rank would the Somir be at compared to all the monster species in your knowledge?
Khan asked.
He wanted to grasp exactly what level of monster did they luckily killed. According to System's database, the Somir would be ranked at legendary level, just below the mythical and god-beast level. At this point, Khan grew numb and forgot to even breathe.
What the fuck?
Legendary level? Did I just pick a fight with a legendary monster and even manage to kill it without dying? Khan sat on the ground, completely out of his wits.
For what it's worth,
the Somir in front of the host is only 50 years old. A fully matured Somir would be at least level 200 and around 500 years old. The host has lucked out. The system replied, trying to console Khan.
Yes, extreme luck.
Otherwise, even that boulder wouldn't have managed to kill it. Rather, the boulder would have cracked instead if it was a matured Somir. Khan finally came to terms with his luck. Hey system, will there be any side effects if I eat it in one go? This core looks extremely high grade and powerful. I won't explode right after eating it, right? Khan asked. He wasn't stupid to eat out something that looked so powerful and full of magical energy.
No.
Ability Absorption Divine ability will control the flow of the mana absorbed and distribute it inside the host without causing any side effects to the host's physical body.
System informed Khan.
Truly a cheat code. Khan sighed and ate the violet core of Somir. A sudden surge of energy emanated from the core as soon as it reached inside Khan's stomach. Khan quickly signaled Omega to be on guard and sat on the bare ground with his legs crossed, in a Buddha lotus position, just like those cultivation manhuas and novels. He understood how crucial this moment was. His entire body felt like it was breaking through its limits every second, and Khan went into a meditating state, focusing on the flow of mana inside his body while trying to comprehend how mana itself functioned in this world. From what God of Darkness told Khan back then, the magical energy in Vantria was so abundant that creatures here absorbed it inside their souls, which eventually allowed their bodies to adapt to it and become fortified with time. And otherworlders like Khan who were summoned here had souls far stronger than the creatures living here, so their souls could absorb both magical and natural energy in this world far many times faster and process it in a short time. During his meditative state, he felt that something inside him was becoming more larger and denser as the core was being absorbed at a fast pace.
Ding, ding, ding.
The notification sound in his head kept ringing more than 24 times, and the aura Khan was radiating was becoming denser, and the area covered under it was expanding gradually. Khan was leveling up at an unimaginable rate. After 2 hours of being in this state, Khan finally opened his eyes. With mental clarity so many times higher than before, the reach of his eyesight becoming so sharp that he could even see every single hair on his arm and even count them without losing track. His entire thought process became 3 times faster than before, and his demeanor changed from a warrior-like man to a warlord who controlled everything around him. This wasn't just physical or mental change, rather a complete transformation for Khan. As if he was born anew and lived through decades of life fighting battles and reigning as a king. Khan was no longer an uninformed man. He understood one thing after his body and mind underwent this massive change. He had somehow managed to inherit the will of the Somir. A system. Give me all the details on my attributes and skills.
A detailed report. Khan ordered.
Even the way he interacted with the system had changed. Earlier, whenever he asked any questions or commanded the system, it was more like him relying on some external being who he needed. But now, the way he commanded the system was more like a tyrant giving an order to one of his subjects. Host attributes and skills are as follows.
Name, Khan, host. Species, human. Level, 30. Strength, 60. Agility, 60. Dexterity, 90. Defense, 50. Mana, 150.
Divine abilities. Ability absorption, dimensional law, synthesis. Blessings. War dominance, stage 1. Weapon mastery, master rank. Combat mastery, master rank. Survival intent, stage 1. Berserk god mode, 5 times the physical strength. War deity body, stage 2. Gifts. All languages knowledge known to the war deity. Abilities and skills.
Alpha wolf's claws. Alpha wolf's howl. Long stride. Sprinter. Hunt perception. Predator's eyes. Panorama vision. Wilker hide. Acute sense. Poison acid.
Poison immunity, grandmaster rank.
Somir scale body.
Executioner's gaze. Finally, after going through everything he possessed till this point, Khan stopped thinking about his current state and calmed his mind. Without wasting any more time, he jumped inside the nest and came closer to the golden-shelled eggs that the mother Somir died protecting. Khan had no regrets for what he did until now, but after inheriting the Somir's will, he felt an innate form of connection towards these eggs as if they were his own kin, like they were his own children. He touched 2 of the 3 eggs with his hands and commanded the system again. Check their situation. Can they survive?
Khan spoke. Scanning complete.
Both the eggs are in the midway of maturity. However, they have already formed the traces of their bloodline and their cores. At this moment, the system voice stopped as if hesitating to reveal more. But then after a long pause, it continued again. But without Mother Somir managing heat temperature to help their maturity, the embryos will die in 2 days. Only the heat received from the Mother Somir can ensure their survival. As soon as the system told him this, he put his hand on the 3rd egg only to receive the same response from the system. Khan clenched his fists and a look of regret was on his face. He knew it was the will of Mother Somir making him think this way because Khan's action in pursuit of strength and survival led to this moment. So what if this was a kill or be killed world? Did he really have to attack the Somir in the first place? He could have gone somewhere else and left the Somir, who was only guarding its eggs alone. And these rare eggs would one day breed life of their own. At the end of the day, these were sentient beings just the same as Khan was. Khan didn't just kill their mother, he also gave these little ones a death sentence. There were two conflicting sides in his head. One was justifying his actions, while the other one was berating him for being heartless. Tears trickled down Khan's eyes as he looked towards the eggs and then the dead body of the Somir lying outside the nest. Unlike his own family, who were never there for him. This legendary creature, which was a mother itself, gave its life for the children, without even flinching twice. This motherly love was something Khan never felt in his previous life.
I'm sorry,
Khan said and wiped off the tears. The Somir was indeed a legendary creature, to have its core form a will. So naturally, this will was making Khan feel guilty for his actions. Khan understood this as well, but couldn't find a way to justify his doing either.
A system, tell me.
Is there a way I can save these eggs?
Khan asked.
With our current situation and abilities at the host's disposal, it's impossible.
Damn it.
Khan cursed, feeling even more regret than before. System detects that the host's mind is being influenced by the will of the deceased Somir. Taking precautionary measures. Would host like to terminate this external consciousness? System asked. There was indeed a way for Khan to not feel guilty any longer. And he'd be back to being himself before he absorbed the core. Wait,
Khan said.
He did not want to run away from his doing. Can I merge them and create a subordinate?
Khan asked the system. Yes.
Since the embryos haven't formed a full consciousness, they can be considered lifeless beings. But host will need a dead body to merge them with. Or the resultant subordinate will not possess any physical abilities of this species, since the embryos haven't developed any of them at this stage. With multiple cores and bloodlines that are yet to be awakened, the embryos will not yield a proper form of their species either. The system gave all the possible outcomes to Khan should he choose to use them for creating a new subordinate. Khan understood what this would mean. A being that won't be useful to him or won't even have a proper consciousness even after going through his synthesis divine ability. Khan had no options available. But then he suddenly saw the dead body of the mother Somir and had an idea.
A system.
Completely terminate the external consciousness. Khan commanded the system. The next second, Khan felt all the guilt he felt disappear as if nothing happened at all. His innate connection to the eggs was severed as well. And now he was back to his clear and focused mind he gained after he absorbed the core of Mother Somir. But this didn't mean that he had forgotten what he felt just a few seconds ago. Khan wrapped his arms around one egg and lifted it, taking it closer to the dead body of Mother Somir. He repeated the same action for the remaining eggs and came close to the head of the Somir. He gently patted on the lifeless head of the Somir and said with eyes full of regret and determination at the same time.
I'm sorry.
This is the only I can make sure that your children didn't die in vain. And whatever comes out of this procedure, I promise you that I'll make it so strong one day, that even the ancient godbeast like the basilisk will not be able to stand on even grounds with it. That will be my penance for condemning your children to the fate of death.
Chapter 14. The Rebirth.
Khan came back to the eggs, made a physical touch to 2 eggs with his right hand and the last egg and the dead body of Mother Somir with his left hand and left leg. All he had to do was form physical contact with all 4 of these in any way he could.
Emerge.
Khan activated his synthesis divine ability and began the process of merging the eggs and the body together. Unlike the previous times, something different happened during this creation of a subordinate.
Ding.
Host has acquired additional 20% basilisk bloodline purity through the 3 eggs. Since all the cores and the bodies belong to the same species, the resultant subordinate will inherit all the physical traits with evolution skill unlocked. Since the host is in the possession of 50% pure bloodline of the basilisk, host can choose to impart this bloodline to the subordinate being created. System informed Khan, who was still not completely over the guilt. Will I lose the chance to use the bloodline abilities of the basilisk in the future?
Khan asked.
He had to know this first.
No.
The bloodline is already part of the host's body, so the host will not lose it. However, host is currently not able to awaken the effects and abilities of this bloodline. The subordinate will be able to awaken these traits and skills with time. Host is advised to find more samples of this or any other bloodlines of godbeast to acquire their abilities and even transform himself into these godbeasts in the future. Note: host will need to absorb a mythical rank metamorphosis bloodline to aid this process.
Do it,
Khan said as soon as System finished giving the possible outcomes. Unlike the time he created Omega, this synthesis process lasted for an entire hour. This showed how complex and critical this whole process was compared to his previous attempt. Beads of sweat were dropping down Khan's head. He noticed that out of 150 points of mana he had, only 5 points were left. This process indeed required a lot of mana as well. Still, he didn't regret it or budge a bit. Finally, all the 3 shadows that covered the 3 eggs and the biggest one, which covered the entire body of Mother Somir, merged. But this time, another surprising phenomenon occurred. A fog of dark color spread around 1 kilometer radius from where Khan was carrying out the synthesis. And an unimaginably chilling aura pressured the entire surrounding of the valley. Even the insects flying in the air fell. This was an aura of dread, anger, and supremacy, only exuded by the kings of empires or beings who were of higher forms and standing at the top in the food chain. This was the aura of an absolute ruler. The dark fog started coalescing together, and the giant shadow that was covering the body of Somir was forming a shape that of a snake-like creature, even taller, bigger and broader than the Mother Somir was. Omega, who was standing far away and was on guard duty when Khan was carrying out the synthesis procedure, even fell on the ground under this sheer pressure. By no means Omega was weaker, but the creature being created was already on a different league that both Khan and Omega could not compare to. Finally, after 10 minutes of adjusting its final form, the creature came to be. A giant black snake-like creature with 2 horns growing from the backside of its skull came into sight. Its bright yellow eyes with black pupils, 2 giant fangs and sharp teeth were revealed when it opened its mouth. Its entire body except the abdomen part was covered in dark and sturdy scales which looked like an upgraded version of Somir's scales. Even more sturdier, darker and edged with small spikes. When this creature stood with its full body, it was already 25 meters tall. And Khan could not even see how long its total length was. The creature gazed at Khan with dreadful eyes as if trying to defy Khan's control over him. Khan activated his war dominance aura the next second, trying to display his authority. To which the gigantic snake bared his large fangs against Khan and screeched at him loudly. This was a war for dominance amongst those trying to establish their authority. Ding! The system voice sounded in his mind and the information about the creature appeared. Synthesis successful. New subordinate created. Evolution skill unlocked. Species: Voronir variant basilisk. Rank: mythical. Khan could feel the pressure, which was twice stronger than the Mother Somir. He felt the killing intent from the eyes of this new subordinate. Eyes full of wrath, trying to defy those who stand against you. I have a fitting name for you. From this day forth, your name shall be Rudra. After Khan named the gigantic basilisk variant Rudra, the creature finally stopped baring its fangs against Khan. But it did not budge from its place. Unlike Omega, who sat and bowed in submission to Khan after being created, Rudra didn't show any signs of acknowledging Khan at all. Rather, he looked like very dismissive of his owner. A system, why is he showing such attitude? Khan asked the system in a calm tone. Rudra didn't make him feel threatened at all because he knew it won't attack him because of the restrictions put on it by the divine ability, which made him unable to attack or harm the owner in any way. What bothered Khan was even after giving a name, the gigantic snake didn't show any form of compliance with him at all. It's because the subordinate is a being of very high species and rank compared to the host. Since it inherits the traits of its species and the bloodline of a god-beast, the host is nothing but a weak and lowly creature in its eyes. If not for the restrictions placed by the synthesis divine ability, it would have killed the host the moment it came into existence. System replied.
A weak and lowly creature, huh?
Tell me, System, if I were to fight Rudra in a head-on battle, what are my chances of winning? Khan asked out of curiosity to understand his new subordinate's strength. 0. What? That strong? You're not over-exaggerating, right? Khan found it hard to believe. No. Host barely has a 20% chance of escaping from Rudra if both are to clash in a fight to the death. The system responded in a solemn voice.
Then what should I do?
Because he at least has to listen to me or there won't be any use of creating him at all. Khan asked in a puzzled tone.
Simple.
The host needs to become strong to an extent that not only the subordinate acknowledges but also fears the host. System didn't mingle any words and gave straight-up facts.
Damn it.
Show me his stats. Statistics for the subordinate Rudra are as follows.
Name: Rudra.
Species: Voronir variant basilisk. Evolution skill unlocked. Level can be upgraded through eating other monsters. And rank can be upgraded with higher and purer bloodlines of other godbeasts or their descendant species.
Rank: mythical. Level: 62.
Strength: 1,390. Agility: 1,350. Dexterity: 781. Defense: 1,293.
Mana, 800.
Abilities. Corrosion acid, upgraded version of Somir's poison acid. Hypnosis gaze. Impenetrable scales.
Shadow merge.
Dominatores aura. Silence.
Another moment of silence. Now Khan finally understood why Rudra hadn't acknowledged him as its master. Because compared to Rudra, Khan was nothing but an ant. Even though there was only 20 levels of difference between Khan and Rudra. The stats between them were like the distance between heaven and earth. There was not even a need for comparison. Every aspect of Rudra was at least 30 to 40 times higher than Khan. Even if he were to be on the same level as the snake in front of him, he still won't be able to cover the distance between their strength even by half. This creature was indeed on a whole level above the legendary rank. Khan felt worried that he won't be able to control Rudra at his will at all. Because only strong acknowledges the strong. Weaklings are not even worth looking at in their opinion. And that's why Rudra had not acknowledged Khan in the slightest. The gigantic snake could just swat its tail and Khan would be turned into meat paste. That was their current situation. Because no matter what, an ant cannot control a full-grown dragon. A newborn baby cannot control an adult king just because they held the leash. If not for the restrictions made by the synthesis divine ability, Rudra could kill Khan with a sneeze. And that's why he had to look for a different approach. Khan deactivated his war dominance aura, giving up on trying to make Rudra submit to him. Rather he looked at Rudra as an equal. Because even with the difference in strength, Rudra was still bound to him and Khan needed him to gain more strength and kill stronger enemies. Their situation was of being codependent on each other. You understand what I'm saying, right? Khan asked Rudra. To this, Rudra only changed the way he looked at Khan. From hostility to understanding. Listen, I know I'm weak compared to you and maybe won't gain the same strength as you anytime soon. However, you're also bound to me even if you don't like it. You'll have to follow wherever I go, and I'll need your aid to kill those who are stronger than me. So I have a proposition for both of us. Khan said as he gazed right in the eyes of the mythical basilisk variant, without any hint of fear. Rudra slightly tilted his head as if he was saying, tell me more. Look, I can gain strength by absorbing the abilities of others and eating their cores. In your case, you need to eat their bodies and cores to raise your strength as well. So how about we work as partners on equal footing than a master and servant relationship? Khan proposed his idea. This was the only available option. Rudra screeched at Khan again with disapproving eyes. He just wanted to kill the human standing in front of him, but something kept stopping him from acting upon his will. He was a highly intelligent being, so he understood that there was no other option available. He had to work together with the human.
Good.
Khan said as he understood Rudra accepting the deal through their connection. A system, I have a question. Why are both subordinates black? Even the Somir scales I used were black? Khan needed some clarification as this kept happening frequently. Host is the chosen representative of God of Darkness. You have a very high affinity towards the dark elements in Vantria. Whether it's dark magic or any physical ability which involves having affinity to certain elements.
I see.
Then what's this shadow merge ability? Both Omega and Rudra have it. Khan had noticed this same ability appear in both cases of the subordinates he created. This is an exclusive ability for all the subordinates created by the host which allows them to merge with host's shadow and be with him no matter where the host goes. Host can use it to carry the subordinate with him to any place. There are no restrictions on time, space required or size of the subordinate.
Amazing. This helps a lot.
I thought I'd always have to hide them somewhere far from people's eyes. Now I can just carry them with me. And I'll never be alone either. Khan let out a small chuckle. He looked at Rudra again and said, you want to go and hunt some food and get stronger? To this question, Rudra only maintained aloofness. It's like I'm asking a girl, where do you want to eat? I wanted an ally, not a teenager throwing tantrums. Khan shook his head helplessly.
Come.
Hide in my shadow. We can't let your giant body alert our praise. Stronger ones will have wider senses. It'll decrease our rate of hunts. Khan said as this humongous body was indeed easy to detect and cause a commotion. Surprisingly, Rudra didn't hesitate and turned into a black shadow and mixed with Khan's shadow in just a second. Its building toppling body was nowhere to be seen. Khan with newly acquired mental clarity and mindset wasn't bewildered by this fact. He ordered Omega to come to him. Then he sat on Omega's back and headed towards other directions where they previously avoided going. What followed for the next 2 days was a grand massacre and a huge change in the ecosystem as well as the food chain of the forest. Khan and Omega saw how fierce Rudra was in his combat state. Forget fighting back, many of the strong monsters like some hybrid species of tigers and lions, some odd-looking species which differed from anything Khan ever imagined fell one by one in front of this mythical creature. Some even melted on the spot before they could even run or fight back against Rudra. Khan cried tears of regret because sometimes, this new subordinate would not even let him absorb the abilities and even melt the cores. He had to constantly remind Rudra to leave the bodies intact first. And Rudra's hypnosis sight was even more frightening than his corrosion acid. Because as soon as the prey fell in eye contact with Rudra for long, the monster would stop fighting and instead come to them like the trio were its lifelong best friends. And some even died with happy expressions on their faces. But thanks to Rudra, they managed to kill monsters who were even at level 65. Strength didn't matter to Rudra because he was in a different league altogether. His stats were far higher for his level because of the bloodline and species rank. And with Khan and Omega distracting the prey or goading it into attacking them and release Rudra out of Khan's shadow at crucial moments, they managed to catch their prey off guard and finish the fight in just a single sweep. The cores naturally went to Khan as he needed them the most. He would occasionally let Omega chomp on them as well because currently, the dire wolf was the weakest among the Trinity. Rudra only ate the bodies and left small ones for Omega. He found it beneath of him to eat the cores of these weak monsters which barely helped him raise his strength. If not for the Somer's core, Khan would be far weaker. But things turned out in his favor in the past 2 days. The stronger the enemy, the more beneficial the core for him. In just 2 days, Khan went from level 30 to level 35. Omega went from 15 to 25 because he was eating both cores and the leftover bodies of these monsters. And Rudra only raised 2 levels as he needed much stronger enemies and cores to raise his strength. And they had killed all the possible candidates. There was nothing left for them in this forest any longer. On the 3rd day, however, they heard a sound of infighting in the west of the forest. Khan and Omega followed the noise while Rudra hid in Khan's shadow. After finally reaching the source of the sound, Khan let out tears of joy.
Finally. Some humans.
Chapter 15, Price Thi Savio.
There was a grotesque battle happening in front of a cliff. Khan hid among the small trees and bushes and observed the scene in front of him. 2 groups in a battle to the death. One appeared to be normal merchants and their bodyguards, while the other being a group of bandits. And the merchant side at the losing side in this case. Only 2 merchants and 5 bodyguards versus more than 12 bandits surrounding them. Many of the merchants and bodyguards lying on the ground, their bodies lifeless. Khan, who was watching from 30 meters distance from within the plants and bushes, could clearly see what was exactly happening. These poor merchants were ambushed in a well-thought trap. Because on bandit group side, there were only 3 casualties and 2 injured. While the merchant side having lost more than a dozen men despite having around the same number of people. Khan rejoiced in his head. He finally found a way to get out of the damn forest and also play the hero part so that the losing side will be indebted to him. Compared to how Rudra and Omega killed their enemies, the scene in front of him was like children playing house. And he too was accustomed to a lot of killing in the week he had spent in the forest. Plus he had absorbed the abilities of many predators in the forest. And acquired and merged many of their abilities. One being Hunter's Intent, he created after absorbing the abilities of a hawk-like bird and a scaly lion-like monster. And this new ability helped him gauge the strength of his enemies, like how Survival Instinct Blessing from Cravel let him feel the killing intent directed at him. And he found that none of the bandits that were attacking the merchants and the bodyguards were nearly half as strong as him. But he decided to wait up a bit more. He had to make his entry in the most crucial moment. Otherwise, his help would go underappreciated. Khan wasn't hasty to help because he knew that he too will be looked at suspiciously after he saved the poor merchants. Because a half-naked man, wearing wolf hide coming out of a deep forest to help out poor travelers worked only in fictional stories. As soon as the trouble was gone, everyone would think like Red looks sus. And would point their swords at him next. Among the bodyguards, there were 2 women and 3 men. One of the women having a metal wand in her hand who was conjuring spells and creating barriers to help her allies. The other woman being an archer who looked very skilled and fast at shooting her arrows every time an enemy tried to make a move. Out of 3 men, 2 were the tank and the swordsman, while one looked like the healer who was in the center of the battle formation. All these 5 had very a deep understanding of each other and their coordination was a sight to behold. This was a team that worked with each other for years.
Classic RPG stuff. Khan thought.
But no matter what, even a strong formation would fall in front of sheer numbers. The merchants were of no help in this case, and the bodyguards were simply getting too tired to fight as the time passed. Finally, the bandits broke through their formation and attacked the mage and healer of the group. These two had no fighting capabilities at a short distance. Even the archer was forced to use her daggers as she lost the advantage of distance. The middle-aged man who was the tank and young swordsman were barely holding 2 to 3 enemies at bay by themselves. At this rate, they were all going to die. One of the bandits shouted, "Don't hurt the women, both are quite exquisite. We can enjoy their bodies for a long time." The voice came from a burly and tall man who was wielding a giant cleaver. His wide and strong arms easily managing to hold the weight and swing it without any problem. The tank, who was already bearing the brunt of 3 bandits, fell back after this newcomer attacked him with a vertical swing of his cleaver. Follow the boss's orders. And don't let them commit suicide. We can sell them later for a high price in the slaves market as well. They are quality goods, said one of the bandits who was standing in the middle of their group and knocked an arrow, aiming towards the healer of the group. Lecherous gazes were focused on both the women in the groups, while the men were already dead in their eyes. From the bushes across the road, a figure silently walked behind these bandits without making any sound. The figure stood behind one of the archers in the group who was the farthest from the battle. Before he could even notice anything, a strong hand covered his mouth while the other one grabbed his neck from behind. Before the archer could even make a sound, an unbearable amount of force was exerted from the hand and his neck was snapped right that very moment. The figure slowly put down the dead archer on the ground and looked towards another archer just 3 meters ahead. The figure walked behind this second archer and snapped his neck just like the earlier one.
2 down.
10 to go. The figure spoke softly. It was none other than Khan. He decided that it was about time he interfered and saved the merchants and their bodyguards who were close to cross the threshold of life to death. But he chose to do it the silent way because waltzing in would jeopardize the lives of these people if the bandits were alerted and went all in with their attacks. Now they were just laughing at the defending side and passing on slanders on the women about how they'll play with their naked bodies. These remarks disgusted Khan, yet he chose to use their diverted attention to his advantage. Khan quickly left the scene and focused on the next batch of targets, the healers amongst the bandit group. Khan crouched from the bushes and silently appearing both these 3 healers. He had to be decisive because after this, the bandits would be alerted. He grabbed the neck of one of the healers and snapped it the next second. Before the other healer standing close even noticed anything, Khan focused all his strength in his right fist and sent a devastating punch to other healers' heads.
Bang!
The healer's head exploded right on the spot. He didn't even get to react and wail in pain before his head turned into broken eggshells and red blood and the brain splattered on the ground.
What?
The remaining healer shouted in surprise. This made other bandits look behind their backs. What they saw was 4 dead bodies on the ground, while one had his brains splattered like a watermelon. Khan did not stop and dashed towards the last healer in a single leap, his right knee focused towards the sternum of the healer. The force and momentum were so strong that as soon as Khan's knee touched the ribcage, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. The healer shouted as his body was flung backward by that forceful attack, dropping on the ground the next second. The man spat a big chunk of blood from his mouth and started choking on it. Khan didn't waste any time looking at it, and he ran towards the closest swordsman, who was barely processing what just happened. The swordsman grabbed his sword tightly and ran to attack Khan.
You fucker.
Die! He shouted and swung his sword horizontally. To this, instead of running away or trying to dodge the attack, Khan increased his pace, and before the sword could even touch him, he was already in close proximity of this bandit. He quickly grabbed the wrist of this bandit, stopping the sword midway and twisted it forcefully. Khan headbutted the swordsman and kicked him in his sacred temple with all the force in the leg. Crack! 2 walnuts were broken that day. The bandit who just lost his ability to reproduce wailed in agony and grabbed his crotch. Khan quickly picked up the fallen sword and held it like a long pole in his right hand, then closed his left eye as if trying to aim. The next second, he threw the sword with all his might at one of the bandits holding a scepter in his hand.
The mage.
Before the mage could even react, the sword pierced through his neck, even breaking the bones and exiting out from the other side. Up to now, everything happened within just 20 seconds as soon as Khan was noticed by the bandits. Naturally, they weren't going to stand there and wait for Khan to kill them. Kill that motherfucker! One of the bandits shouted and several of the bandits charged at Khan, with eyes full of anger and hatred. They wanted to cut him into hundreds of pieces. The closest bandits attacked with his mace and aimed at Khan's head. Khan, who already had his hunter intent and survival instinct blessing active as soon as he entered in this fight, was already moving like a jaguar. Too agile and quick to react in just a second. He sidestepped before the swinging mace could even touch him and kneed the bandit in his ribcage. Bones cracked and the bandit caved in, the broken bones piercing his heart. "Hey, who the fuck are you?" The boss of the bandits finally shouted. His eyes were full of rage and killing intent.
"Your death."
Khan replied in a stern tone and picked up the mace. He walked towards the swordsman, who was lying on the ground with his hands holding his crotch after that sudden attack.
No.
"Don't come near me," the bandit shouted, color dropping away from his face as he saw the murderous eyes of the half-naked man in front of him.
Gotcha.
The sound of something hard broken could be heard in the area, and just like that, another bandit fell. Khan took out the mace from the mushed head which was lying on the ground like a broken watermelon.
Who's next?"
Khan asked as he gazed towards the remaining bandits. Out of the 12 bandits, only 5 remained as Khan systematically took out 7 of the bandits in a matter of seconds. This eased the tension on the bodyguards who were suppressed till now and finally could fight on even terms with the bandits. The tank and the swordsman of their group already noticed Khan when he took down the archers as they were fighting in the front. But they kept silent as they were more focused on fending off the bandits they were dealing with. "You're going to pay for this. I'm going to torture you to death," the big and brawly bandit boss shouted. The boss looked like a giant bear, had a long brown beard and his entire physique was that of a seasoned warrior. "Looks like you don't get it. It's not me who's gonna pay. It's you who will pay for your sins," Khan said as he readies himself for a brute clash. You took everything from me," said Khan loudly. Enough to reach the bodyguards and the who were fighting against the remaining bandits. "I don't even know who you are," replied the bandit boss as he charged at Khan. The giant cleaver swung around a couple of times, Khan dodging them by sliding and sidestepping. Both times it looked like he barely missed the attack and survived by hair's breadth. In response, Khan also swung the mace but was tackled and defended against. The bandit boss was a skilled fighter and had tons of experience. Till now, Khan only fought with his bare hands and didn't even use a single one of the abilities and skills he gained by absorbing monsters. This would raise suspicion and he'd appear like a monster from the forest. Unlike the other bandits, the leader was well geared up and had a lot of his vital body parts covered in either iron or a leader armor. Khan could easily rip that apart with his alpha wolf's claws, but he had to play the part, so he wasn't going to do anything that would arouse unnecessary questions. Another powerful horizontal swing came. Khan squatted down and used a leg sweep to break the body balance of the bandit leader, who was already in motion. Clang! The bandit leader fell on the ground as his entire body was in full momentum. Khan quickly attacked the right hand that was holding the giant cleaver and broke the fingers on the hand with a single attack. Khan's mace landed on the chest of the fallen bandit boss and he kept swinging it over and over again till it broke through the chest armor.
Stop. No.
The bandit boss yelled while getting hit with the mace on his torso again and again. His chest was bleeding, his face was already bruised and blood was flowing from his nose. Somehow, Khan's hits were getting stronger and stronger and his body could barely retaliate. Was this guy holding back till now? The bandit leader asked himself. Khan noticed that the remaining bandits were killed by the bodyguards with their impeccable coordination and timing. He turned his eyes back to the bandit leader and said, Look, none of them are left. Shouldn't their leader also join them?" Khan said while acting as he was delivering a death sentence.
Let me go please.
"I'll do whatever you want," the bandit boss begged. Did you let my friends go? Did you let all those women and children go?" Khan shouted in an enraged voice, hearable to anyone within half a kilometer. His voice contained wrath and despair at the same time. What did we ever do to you?" The bandit leader asked in a deathly gasped voice.
The farmers.
"The mercenaries," Khan said as he ripped apart the chest armor and clenched his fists. He sat on the upper body of the bandit leader and started punching the bandit's face with only enough force to let the sound reach everyone's ears. Who the fuck are you even talking about?" The bandit boss said as he was barely able to stand these punches. "You don't even remember them? You bastard! Were they just nobodies you killed for fun? Your mistake was letting me escape that time." Surprised, the bandit leader asked, "Are you one of those guys?" Khan had no idea what this guy was talking about, but played along. Splat! The head was cut in two and the blood and brains were out in the open. The bad guy had played his part. There was no more need of him. Khan didn't stop here, he looked towards the sky as if trying to remember something.
Yeah?
Khan roared with all his might, his head held towards the open sky as he started sobbing on the place, his voice trembling with pain and sadness. Elena, Stephen, Pavel, Uncle Vasimir. I've avenged you. I've finally avenged you. Kon said as tears trickled down from his eyes. Kon got off from the dead bandit leader's body and fell on his knees as if a dam of hidden grief had finally broken down. He kept crying and wiping off tears from his face. The angle was good enough to get noticed by everyone from the merchants and the bodyguard's side. This was a very touching scene for anyone who lost a family member or someone they loved. Finally, after staying silent for a while, an elderly man who was one of the merchants and the middle-aged man from the bodyguards walked in close to Kon. The elderly man spoke in a soft and gentle tone.
Thank you, young man.
You saved all of our lives today. If not for you, none of us would be alive at this moment.
Yes.
We would be dead men, and the women in our group would be left to a fate controlled by these bastards. And we would never be able to avenge our fallen comrades, either, you said the middle-aged man, who had a giant shield on his back. His build was no different than the bandit leader, but he looked more of a father figure type of person. He had gray hair strands in the middle of his head and a completely white beard. The elderly man was scrawny, but had an appearance of a well-off businessman just by looking at his clothes. Kon replied with a solemn voice, maintaining his previous demeanor. I didn't do it for you.